Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Small Cap Discoveries conference call. Today on our call, we have Paul Ghezzi, the CEO of Kontrol Energy. This is a follow-up from our initial call, and KNR trades on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the symbol KNR and on the OTC under the symbol KNRLF. Kontrol Energy is trading at roughly $4.20 with about 31 million shares outstanding, or about $130 million market cap. I'd now like to hand it over to Paul Andriola.
Thank you, Trevor. Really happy to have Paul Ghezzi back here. I think we spoke about a month and a half ago. That was back when Kontrol was a quiet little company. That's no longer the case. A lot of people asking about KNR and Kontrol. For those who don't know, I think we talked to Paul when the stock was trading around 50 or 60 cents. Subsequently, he's made a couple announcements, and the stock's run to as high as about $6.50. It's pulled back a little bit, but we thought we'd try to catch up with Paul to really get an update on what's happened. He's announced a product called BioCloud. We certainly want to hear about that. And Paul, if I can just ask you, maybe give us like the 60-second pitch of the business, just in case somebody doesn't remember or there's anybody new here, and then let's go right into the BioCloud and tell us what you can. Paul?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for having me. So Kontrol Energy is in the smart buildings industry, and what we define as a smart building is a combination of energy management, analytics, air quality, and continuous emission. So we cover the multi-residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional sector. Great client base includes companies like Toyota, Beyond Meat, many of the large REITs, and so that's our history. Part of that history, and what we're going to get into with BioCloud, is we own two operating subsidiaries that have deep experience, decades of experience in managing and monitoring air quality in real time at the particulate level for many industrial facilities. And in March, we asked the question, can we measure air quality, or can we measure for COVID like we do air quality? I think from the public market perspective, that showed up as a press release in July. So from March to July, we were extremely quiet, building the business, looking at the technology, made our first announcement in July. And so since then, the stock's performed really well. And I know there's tons of questions on BioCloud. We get them every day, and happy to address those.
Perfect. Well, why don't we start by saying maybe just bring us up to date with a couple of the announcements you've made. You've done some testing of the BioCloud product, and maybe just describe the testing and what the results were.
Sure. So we've worked with two independent labs at the University of Western, and your viewers and listeners may or may not know, but only a handful of labs in Canada have access to the live COVID virus. And when you're testing against a live virus, you're waiting in line. I think we've done a really good job of moving to the front of the line, so people really don't understand that, how important that is to our story. And so what that means is we've got something here that is moving rapidly. So from the summer months and into August, there was 3 major tests, which we defined as testing positive with the dormant COVID virus, with our detection chamber, which is how we detect the virus, testing positive with dormant virus with our full functioning prototype, and then we did the live COVID virus. And so for investors to understand, beneath those 3 broad tests are multiples of tests that roll up into a result. And we're working with independent labs. This is not a lab company we own. They have no interest in our business, and so they're independent scientists that we're working with, that we've engaged with. The National Research Council of Canada, which is essentially the Canadian government, provided us $50,000 to accelerate the testing, and that went through our operating subsidiary CSA, which is really the operating part of this team. Kontrol BioCloud is a new operating subsidiary, which will be the sales and marketing and product development team. So from that perspective, it's been extremely busy. We're independently testing. So we announced our live COVID results last week, and on Thursday we announced those. On Friday, I got asked the question, so do you have $1 billion in sales yet? So, for anyone who's built a business on this call, I'm getting a lot of those questions, which, we could say are annoying, but hey, they're part of the capital markets, right? So if you think about how quickly we're moving, working 18-hour days, We get our results on Thursday. We provide those to the government on Monday. On Friday, we're having calls this week. So I can't talk too much about the discussions we're having with the government. What I can say is there's multiple discussions. There's lots of interest in what we're doing. The NRC gave us the money to test in the independent labs. They have the results. So that's what I can say about that. We are not releasing those results to the public because it includes our IP and our process. Now, we're going to get into a process of commercialization. We're working feverishly over the next 30 and 45 days. And so from that perspective, we've also told the market there's more testing on the product. And this level of testing is to establish lower detection limits, which we will then publish. We're not going to publish those today because we want the product commercialized. So let's call that a 30 to 45 day window of more testing, commercialization, getting the product ready. You know, we're moving at lightning speed here because our view is the pandemic is here. You know, I heard from a friend today, anecdotally, in Europe who travels a lot, that, you know, Austria is looking at perhaps closing down again. There's great consternation in Italy. So this pandemic may be raging again in November when the flu season mixes with the COVID season or the COVID pandemic. So we're trying to be as ready as we can to have units, you know, being shipped in November. I'm not going to make any revenue forecasts about that, but I want to give you, the investors, a sense, or shareholders, a sense of the pace that we're working at. And, you know, we're not testing our own product, right? This is independent testing. What I would say is there's things that we can't disclose right now that we can disclose in the future. And that's for, you know, that's for any business or any company. You know, we've had people say, how do you do it? And we're not going to disclose that because that's our IP and patents. So, you know, there is some unknowns for investors, but what they should look at is all the facts behind the testing, who's giving us the money. You know, the public announcements we make are factual. So it's been a very busy time. And that's just since Thursday that we announced a live COVID test, right? So that's where we are.
Gotcha. Why don't we, talk a little bit more about BioCloud. In theory, really, we're dealing with COVID now, but there's nothing really stopping you from any other sort of airborne viruses or particulates like that. Is that correct?
That's right. So BioCloud is not COVID specific, but COVID is the important, you know, virus today, right? And so we've developed this technology to be able to trace other viruses through our detection chamber, which is part of it is mechanical, how you sample air over time, how you bring that air in, how you manage that process. The other part of it is the chemical reaction we've created with our independent labs, how we track for COVID and how we track for other viruses. So that part of it, which we call our detection chamber, is replaceable, and we can change the reagent, process, or mixture to tag for other viruses that we want to look for. We use a very sophisticated optical sensors that creates an alert. It's not an alarm. That alert can be transmitted, you know, through email to the appropriate person. In this classroom, it might be the teacher or the principal. On a bus, it might be the bus driver. So here's really how the technology works. If you've got individual testing today, you're never going to be able to test everyone in a classroom or an office building or a bus. So people are going to get sick. They're not going to know. And you also have asymptomatic. You're going to find out in a week that someone's tested positive. Then contact tracing begins, and how far have we gone? And then you might have to shut down an entire school because, you know, 5 kids have picked up the virus. So from our perspective, we consider ourselves a safe space technology. We're sampling air over time. We're looking for the virus shedding coming into our system. So in a room of 1,000 square feet, you know, we may be sampling the air 4 times an hour fully. And if you think about 18 people in a room that's 1,000 square feet, within about 30 to 40 minutes, you're breathing everyone else's breath, right? And we can't police people wearing masks. We're not really sure what's happening in these rooms or offices or buses. So by sampling the air over time, continuously over about a period of an hour, we think we'll have enough accumulation of the virus to flag it and to send an alert. So what happens then? Well, now there's protocols that come into place where everyone can be tested and contact tracing can begin. And so that's an entirely different process than what we have today. So we're not saying we're the silver bullet, right? What we're saying is we're part of this ecosystem where we can add a lot of value. And in the context of the market, if the government's going to spend $3 billion on HVAC systems and changing filters, which we're not arguing against, that's going to have very little impact on deterring the virus or containing the virus or stopping the spread. If they're going to spend that amount of money in schools and buildings, why wouldn't they allocate a portion of that capital to a BioCloud technology, right? So that's our pitch and the question we're asking and the conversations we're having. And it's a binary event. We're going to get a contract at some point, and then the contract will have a certain value, and that will be validation to the market. And so that's, we're operating on the premise that we're part of an ecosystem of solutions. We're not the silver bullet or the magic bullet, but we're an important part of what's being designed to deal with these things.
Fantastic. Give us a better sense of what this thing looks like. How big is it, and maybe some of the economics behind making it and selling it.
Yeah, so it's basically 12 by 12. So it'll sit on the wall. It'll look similar to a box with a little bit of shape to it. So we've got some pictures on the website. And what we're basically doing, what we've got attached to it is a fan and an air sampler. And we can circulate air, draw in air. We can attach to HVAC systems, depending on how the setting is designed. What we basically want to do is sample enough air over an hour that if the virus is shedding in the room, so really we're in a room where there's people breathing, interacting with each other, and we're less designed for commercial office towers. We're much more designed for confined spaces. And so from a pricing perspective, the way we're looking at it today, it's $12,000 a unit. It's technology that is very complex. However, the way we look at this is if we're scaling the business and we're producing thousands of units, that price is going to come down because our costs are going to come down and our margin is going to be protected. So right now it's $12,000 per unit, very flexible on large orders and getting our costs down through larger manufacturing opportunities.
Any sense of what kind of margins you're going to get sort of coming out of the gate?
We don't really talk about our margins, but they're pretty healthy. And the reason is we don't want to skew, the cost versus margin as we're negotiating potential opportunities.
Right.
Anecdotally, we're getting calls globally right now. So, today was India, China, Russia. So what are they calling about? Give us 1 to 5 units. And we're not doing that. And the reason is we're looking for what I would call an order that cements the technology, but also protects the technology. So from a patent perspective, we will be patented the detection chamber, but a patent doesn't protect your revenue. And you end up in court for 10 years. So we're going to cement some significant orders that will start helping to protect the technology, and the onesies and twosies and fivesies, we'll deal with those later. But what I can say, factually, is the inbound calls are kind of overwhelming us at this point. And there's no rush to sell 1 or 2 units at a time, even though potentially that could be a market in the future. We really think this is an institutional opportunity, whether you call that government or institutional. There's enough opportunities out there in schools, retirement homes, long-term care facilities, and mass transportation where, let's face it, people don't feel safe. I was in a movie theater the other day and there was 4 people in the movie theater. So there is this thing that we have in society right now where we don't feel safe in spaces where other people congregate. So that's what we're trying to solve with our technology. And it's not individual testing and it's not a Health Canada product. It's sampling error over time.
What sort of manufacturing capacity do you contemplate here?
Yeah, so what we're doing and what we plan to do more of is we're talking with what we would call international contract manufacturers. Groups that could handle 10,000 units each or 20,000 units to help us with our global supply chain. And so, if you have a lead order but you don't have the capacity, the issue is, can you fulfill? If you build your own capacity and you don't have the order, the issue is, are you using your capital properly? So our view is the best approach is to use outsourced manufacturers that we partner with under NDA and IP protection and allow us to ramp up. So we feel very comfortable that we have enough capacity to deliver through third-party contract manufacturers, and we think that's the way to go. So from milestones and credibility, I would say there's a couple of important things that could happen with Kontrol, and one of them is the National Research Council of Canada providing more support, and that would be a milestone, and then a government lead order, that's a milestone. And you recall this, right? Because you called this early. you can't, one thing in the public markets that you really have to get away from, and I've learned this as a CEO, is you can't get into this daily debate of what's the share price today and, what's a negative comment today. You just have to execute on your business, right? And as we hit these milestones, we become more valuable because there's more validation. And so that's what we're working towards is execute on the business. The share price will take care of itself. What's really important for Kontrol, we're not raising equity. I don't need to do a raise. So why is that? We've got about 2.5 to 2.7 million on the balance sheet. We're EBIT positive. We're not burning through cash, so I don't need cash for my operating business. And we think there's commercialization support that's coming in for Kontrol through various government sources. I can't say specifically when or what. So we feel very comfortable that we can get this to commercialization. Then we've got our contract manufacturing partners. So I really don't need to raise capital here, assuming we get a lead order, that could fund itself. So we're in a really good spot. So what we're going to do is just really hyper focus on execution, deliver the next milestone, and just keep ramping up the business.
And you mentioned sort of who you see as some of the sort of users. So you got schools, you got mass transportation. I think you said senior citizens living. I mean, really, it's almost like it's probably easier to describe what's not applicable. It's basically anywhere you get crowds, right? Any buildings. Yeah.
Good point. So I would say we are not built for large commercial plazas, large commercial office towers where there's an abundance of space. If you want a social distance on a 30,000 square foot floor, that's pretty easy. Where we really excel is the more crowded the space, with people breathing. If you said to someone, you want to go into that room where there's, 18 other people breathing, you got no protection, no safety. No one's doing that today, right? That's why people aren't flooding restaurants or bars so let's face the facts that that's true. The question is, can we pick up on the virus in the air? That's the real question, scientifically. And we believe the answer is yes, because we're doing the independent testing and validation. And if we have to hit more milestones, we'll do that. But that's really the question. And it's why we're all not rushing back to gyms. That's another example. So we've been contacted by movie theaters, gyms, international hotels. The emails keep coming in because the news has gone global. And so, but our approach really is, this is Canadian technology. We're building IP. We want to protect it. We're not going to sell 1 or 2 units, to India or China at this point. We're really looking for a cementing order that cements the technology and protects it. And then from there, we can really scale into applications. And we're not limited to Canada. We're not limited to schools. So that's somewhat of a narrative that's out there about us. I don't know why, but people latch on to things and make stories about them. So we are talking with various U.S. groups. The U.S. is a natural market. Forget the rhetoric on TV. What we hear at the local and state level is concern, right? States are concerned. The politics aside, that's noise. So we're talking to local and state folks, and we're hearing about concerns about being safe in their space and not wanting to shut down again. So, again, we're part of the value chain of technology that was going to help get us through this. We're not the silver bullet, and we're not the only thing that you should consider. But we certainly believe in a safe space environment, we can play an important role.
And so what I'm hearing too is that really it looks like you're expecting to get a large lead order, and that's likely to come from a government or an organization like that. Is that the case?
I would say, I would define it as multiple orders, large, medium, small, as long as they're considered, from Mark perspective, institutional, government, and not, the type of sale where we're at risk of our technology being ripped apart and copied, right? And so that's really what we're trying to avoid. But the conversations we're having are around institutional, government, safe spaces, multiple applications, and National Research Council being a supporter of Kontrol is very important as part of that process, because they're reviewing our data, they're validating what the scientists say, and the entire ecosystem is about validation, proof of concept, having government have the comfort that they can buy this product, and that's really our focus. And my view is, once that's all done, I don't think sales is going to be a problem. And if we can say that, look, you know, right now the COVID is the focus, but a year from now it's Legionnaire's disease or it's H1N1. That's how we've designed the product. And you know, we don't say we're COVID specific, but the moment in time right now, from a political, you know, public health, let's face it, it's COVID, right? So that's what.
Yeah. Perfect. I'm going to open up some questions. We're going to rifle through these if we can. Question, I mean, competition. What can you tell us about anything in the competitive space right now?
Yeah, so we are actually seeing multiple competitors. We see them coming from the side of the business that we've come from, which is the air quality, continuous emission. We've looked at a couple competitors in the US that are using a particulate approach to flagging for COVID. So US competitors, we've seen the US military put out an announcement that they're engaged with California, Berkeley on developing a similar system. So I think competition right now is global. We don't hear a lot about it in the news because a lot of it we see in development. But my view is it's a race now. And there's going to be varying forms of this type of technology that is looking for air sampling over time. And it's a race. And so we feel like we're in a race against global competitors. I would say we can identify a number, you know, but there may be much more beyond that. So, but we do feel there's competition for sure.
So I've got a question here. It's are orders coming in prior to receiving your CSA mark? Maybe describe, describe what CSA is and you know, answer that if you can.
Yeah, so CSA is basically electrical safety and product approval to operate in Canada. That's basically the standard mark. In the US, it may be UL. In Europe, it may be CE. Our focus is CSA because that's Canadian sales. So, you know, the approach we're taking really is if you're sending us a request for an order and you're from some other country and you want 1 or 2 units, you know, shipped to you or your university or, you know, whatever company you are, we're not accepting those right now. We're keeping those as warm leads for the future. What we're really focused on is an institutional, you know, government sale. That's our focus. So from that perspective, whatever government agencies are interested in us are likely going to track with us through the commercialization and approval process. And there's lots of discussions going on. So as they track with us, you know, I'll be able to answer that question the closer we get to commercialization. So, you know, I feel pretty comfortable that as long as we're commercialized and we can move units off the line and the government's tracking with us, you know, we're going to be in good shape.
And so I may have not heard the answer, but as far as the CSA mark, when do you expect to get that, or, you know, and what is that a major issue?
No, so we have a long history with CSA. It's basically 30 to 45 day process as you're commercializing. Sometimes it's faster, but you know, basically our device, the BioCloud, is attaching into a standard wall unit. We've got some electronic components that can communicate Wi-Fi, intranet, and we've got basically a standard electrical outlet. So from a CSA perspective, the electronic part of the technology is not complex. The chemical part, you know, what we're doing with the virus, that's very complex. But the electrical component, you know, CSA is not complex for us at all.
Perfect. You did touch on your balance sheet. The question here is, what's your cash position? Are you well funded? And your debt position?
Yeah. So we're in a really nice position on cash, so about 2.5 to 2.7. We do have warrant and option money coming in. We've received about $1 million from warrants and options. We think we're going to get about another $1 million. So that's supporting our cash position. So we feel we're in a good spot there. In terms of the balance sheet, we've got about $3 million in convertible debentures at around 70 cents. Those debentures are converting. So that's going to come off the balance sheet, in my view, in the next 4 months. That will all be cleaned up. We've got about $5.8 million of current obligations that we announced 2 months ago as being extended in October for 2 years. So come October, that will move forward 2 years. We're going to have a very clean balance sheet. And I think one thing I want shareholders and investors to know, and this is really important, we took on that debt, that $5.8 million of debt has rolled with us for about 4 years. We took that on, so it's not convertible and it's unsecured. So what's the value of that? We took that on when the shares were about 60 cents. So if you think about, you know, the capital structure, if we took that all in equity, how many more shares would we have today, right? So we've got 31 million basic shares outstanding, I think one of the best structures in Canada. Had we taken that on as equity, we would have diluted the company, to 100 million shares. And what we've done now is we've got a higher share price and the potential to take out those investors in the future, which is fantastic for common share equity non-dilution, which is something we preach about feverishly, that we're big shareholders here, we're operators, we don't want to dilute. And if we can maintain that discipline, if you execute, the share price is going to be higher. It's pretty simple. And so I think people really don't understand the fact that our ability to take on debt has been a huge win for the common equity shareholders. And a lot of people miss that because they focus just on the balance sheet and not the entire capital structure. So I'm glad you asked the question. It's an important question.
Yeah, no, I think you've done a great job handling that. A question, how big of a room can the BioCloud sample?
Well, typically, we're looking at about 1,000 square feet approximately, and about 15 to 17 people, roughly. I mean, it could be less. The fewer the people in the room, right? So if there's 2 people in the room and they're breathing, it takes longer to recirculate that breath through our system. The more people in the room and the more breath, the more we can collect. So if you think about an example of a bus, there was a recent case in China where packed buses were becoming the new cause of COVID because the air circulation is poor, people are breathing next to each other. So that's really area that we shine, is a small room, crowded space, people in the room, and that's really where we excel. So that's how we define the safe space. If it's a larger space, it doesn't really suit us. And if it's a wide open space where, people can accommodate themselves and create a lot of distance, that's not really ideal for us either.
Perfect. Okay, another question. Let me read it right out. Testing in independent labs is working, but once it goes live in a real environment, what are the chances of it not working? So it's the old, taking from lab into the real world. What could happen to make it not work?
Okay, so look, that's a fair question. So what could go wrong? So if we don't gather enough of the virus through our sampling, right? So what we're doing is we're circulating air, we're pulling air in through our air sampler. So let's say we can't get enough of the virus to detect. That's an issue. But how does our system work? So our system works, our detection chamber collects the virus and holds it. And the more air that goes through, the virus loads. So the virus load actually goes higher over time. So what that basically means is, in an hour setting, if we don't flag it, maybe we flag it in hour 2 or hour 3, depending on the volume of air in the room and the number of people. So because it's a loading approach as opposed to a one-shot breath approach, we feel comfortable that it will work over time. And that's really what it's designed to do. And some people have said to me, well, who cares? Everyone's in the room. If they're sick, they're sick. It's really a nonsensical statement, because what happens right now, and if you think about from a public policy perspective, if you find out in a week that 3 kids in that classroom had it, now you're saying, how many rooms do we have to shut down? My view is entire schools are going to be shutting down for a few number of cases. That is a public policy nightmare. So you can say you disagree with the approach. Then you really have to look at the alternative. And the alternative is, we don't know, and everyone just go get tested. But you can't do that every day. And so that's why we think we're part of the solution, not the entire solution, but an important part of the solution.
Wait, here's a really interesting question, but how scaling it down and turning into breathalyzer? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so look, we've had conversations about that. We think the technology can be scaled down. Here's my issue as an operator, right? If we go down that path, that's individual testing and it's Health Canada device, which is fine. But you got to add 6 to 8 months for all kinds of various approvals. So let's say I announce that today. The first reaction is, well, that's going to take you 9 months. So now you're just an R&D company. So we like the idea. We think conceptually it's possible. I've got to execute on what's in front of me, and what's in front of me is the BioCloud product today. And we turn that into a success, and then we can work on a breathalyzer. But we are not an R&D only company. We've got revenue, we've got earnings, we've got cash flow, and we want to execute on what's in front of us. and that's really our focus. But a great question, because something we think about quite a bit.
Another good question here. Okay, so there are other coronaviruses obviously out there. Is it possible that this will trigger a false positive if it's another sort of more benign coronavirus?
Yes, so that is possible. So without getting into the specifics and the IP of how we do it, we do have a process that is looking for false positives in the way that we detect. And so basically, if you want to call that viral noise, there's also noise that comes in the form, of skin cells and other things that are in the air, dust particles. If your system is taking in the air, there's other things in the air. So we've looked specifically at that level of noise and how to reduce it. And so in the lab, we had no false positive, so that we can say that as a fact. However, when you're in a classroom and there's lots of air noise or viral noise or particulate noise, there may be false positive, but we think we have a way to really reduce that. What we're doing during commercialization, so we've been very clear about this, is we're going to set the lower detection limits, and that's going to be part of the technology specification. So I know a lot of people want that today, but we view that as a commercialization specification. And so as we get to commercialization, we will produce that for both customers and shareholders, but not today.
And then sort of a bit of another question in regards to that sort of stuff. And you mentioned it to me in the past. Really, there's no real maintenance to this unit. What we're really dealing with is as soon as there's a positive, something tests positive, the unit basically has to be a capsule has to be reinstalled, and it's running again. So there's no maintenance, but there is a form of call it replacement product.
Yeah. So the detection mechanism, once it comes into contact, with COVID, it must be replaced. We have a self-cleaning mechanism inside the device, which is essentially a bleach compound, which will flush the detection mechanism. Externally, you're probably going to use some kind of bleach cleaner. You're going to spray it down. And then a custodian or a building maintenance person or a facility manager can go in, pop the lid off, essentially pop the front off, replace the detection mechanism with a new one. And that's it. So, I use the example because a lot of people don't think about this. Let's say you've installed a new filter in a school, right? In the HVAC system, and there's COVID in the school. Well, that HVAC filter could now be a biohazard, and we're not thinking about that. And so, if you can replace an HVAC filter as a biohazard and dispose of it properly, the Kontrol BioCloud has a detection chamber that can be disposed of as a biohazard once we flushed it with a cleaning solution, which we do internally. So I think, people need to be aware that it's all around us. And, if you're going to spend on filters that could have and maintenance workers are doing that, our system is built to be pretty simple in terms of maintenance. From our perspective, the detection mechanism is replaceable. So what that does for Kontrol is allow us to create a line of products in the future that are specific to the virus that we're looking for.
Fantastic. You know what? I know you're a busy guy, so I'm not going to take you much longer here. But Paul, I want to really thank you. Obviously, congratulations on what you've managed to accomplish so far. If anything, can you leave us with sort of what we should be watching out for over the next sort of, let's say 3 months, because everything's moving pretty quickly now.
Yeah, so I would say, look, one thing I think we've been pretty good at, and not perfect, no one's perfect, but I think we've established timelines. I think we've executed. I think we've delivered, and our approach is execute first. So over the next 30 to 45 days, we'll be updating the market on commercialization milestones, lower detection limits, when the product will be ready. We'll be updating the market on government participation. So that takes us, let's say, 30, 45, 60 days. We want this product ready for November. So we're working feverishly because we know what's going to happen, and we see it happening in Europe right now. I'm getting calls, basically shutting down. Things are not as good as they appear. And so if we're ready and we're moving on these milestones, I think the company's going to do fantastic. And, we're worth more than we are today, but the market has to determine what that value is. And, we'll focus on executing on the business.
Excellent. Listen, exciting times. We are watching you very closely. Good luck with everything for a whole bunch of different reasons. And again, thank you for your time, and we'll do our best to stay in touch.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Trevor, over to you.
Thanks again for your time, Paul, and we look forward to the future updates, and we'll follow up again with you soon. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.